Well, good evening. Welcome to another meeting, the Apologetics Forum. And I know I've seen most of you in the previous meetings here, so I'm not going to do a big pitch on the Apologetics Forum, but our purpose is to help equip believers in the defense of the faith. And we bring speakers into different churches, and we provide resources to you can walk away with and get more information on God and the Bible and the evidence that we have for the truth of the Bible. So we have Juan here again. Of course, this is your number 6 or something talk, yeah, something like that. And the weekend before, he was actually in Tacoma doing another series of talks. And we have the privilege of having him here this weekend for 5 days. And we've appreciated his many talks that he's given at the different churches, including our Friday night meeting up at Atonement Free, which is our basic anchor point. So I'm going to just open up in a word of prayer and then introduce Juan, and he'll give his talk. And we have a donation box in the back there, and that's all that is for Reasons for Hope Ministry. Juan is a speaker for Reasons for Hope, and as you probably know, he's also a pastor of a Spanish church in Florida. His talk will be in English this night, yes, and no translation necessary. So thanks for being here. Let me just open up a word of prayer, and we also want to keep in mind the folks in Ukraine who are under great pressure and great duress. Amen. Father, we come to you this evening just to thank you for this time that we can have speakers share your word and to provide evidence for the truth that we know through your word and the creation that you have made for us, and you provide much evidence for your truth, and we thank you for that. At this moment, we just think of the folks in Ukraine who are under great pressure and duress. Lord, we just pray that that whole conflict could be brought to a end soon, and we just pray for the protection of the believers there. I know there are many believers in the Ukraine, and they're very enthusiastic about you, and we thank you for that, for their testimony. We thank you now for Juan as well, as he represents you and brings your word to us, and we just pray that you would use him mightily in this occasion as well. Amen.
Amen. Well, I'm happy to be with you guys this evening, and I'm going to be sharing a talk called 5 Reasons Why I'm Not an Atheist. The joke we were speaking about outside is only 5 reasons? Yeah, there's a lot of reasons, but we sum it up in categories. 5 categories of reasons why I'm not an atheist. The point of this talk is for us to have not only confidence in our faith and the fact that what we believe is the truth, and believing in God and being a theist is the correct option when we're thinking about this, because sometimes people are challenged and says, well, how do you know that God exists? How do you know that it's true? What if you're mistaken? What if there is no God? What if the right God is the God of the Muslims or the God of the Hindus? Like, how do you even know? So these kind of questions are very common in the world we live in. Sometimes our young people are completely flooded, inundated with these questions. And so this talk is to give you some confidence that being an atheist is not a good alternative. Not a good alternative. I've given other talks over the last few days about, the case for God and how do we know that God exists and all of that. But today I just want to focus on, atheism is not a good answer. And I also I would encourage you to make at least mental notes, of reasons you can give to people that you come across with that are atheists. If you share your faith with people, you're eventually going to come up to somebody who doesn't believe there is a God. And so it's a good idea to have in your toolbox some arguments that you can use to share with them. Obviously with love and kindness. Our point is not to win arguments. Our point is to persuade people to trust Christ as their Savior. But you need to have good reasons. And so I want to show you some good reasons why. Reason number 1 is because atheism is philosophically unsustainable. So the first reason I'm not an atheist is for philosophical reasons. When I'm talking about philosophical reasons, I'm talking about logic, coherence. I'm talking about relevant. I'm talking about things that are non-contradictory. And so atheism is not a strong, rational position. It is actually philosophically unsustainable. Because to begin with, it's impossible to prove that God does not exist. It's impossible. It's impossible to prove it. What would you need to know to prove that God does not exist? Typically, when I argue or discuss or have a conversation with an atheist, before I talk a lot, I ask a lot of questions. And it's a good tactic to get them to speak about what they believe. And when somebody says, well, I don't believe there is a God, instead of jumping in there and giving him everything I've got, my first response to them is, well, how did you come to that conclusion? Now, what we've done is we've turned the tables. And we're giving them now the opportunity to defend their position. They've made a claim. Okay, back it up. How did you come to that conclusion? And nothing they say will be proof that God does not exist. Typically, the answers they're going to give are something to the effect of, well, if God existed, there wouldn't be so much pain and suffering in the world, and what kind of a God would allow this and that and the other thing, and children, and I'm like, okay, I mean, you have a valid point that there is a lot of suffering in the world, but you do realize that that doesn't prove that God does not exist. If anything, you're attacking God's character. You're questioning whether God is a good God or a bad God. A good God would not allow that to happen. A bad God would allow that to happen. And you're questioning his character, but that doesn't mean he doesn't exist. It doesn't follow. Do you have any other evidence or proof that God does not exist to base that conclusion on? And then I just stay quiet and see what else they have. And typically there's no answer. Why? Because you cannot prove that God does not exist. What would it take for you to prove? Let me give you an analogy that I think you can use that would make it easy for you to understand. What if I ask you, okay, what would it take to prove that there are no pink Cadillacs with purple polka dots? What would it take? Okay, you would need to know what all the color of all the Cadillacs, not just in your town, but in your country, in the whole world, and you would need to know it at the same time. Why? Because you may come into one town and the guy with the Cadillac was on vacation, so you missed it. And you think there isn't one, but there is one, it's somewhere else. For you to categorically say there are no pink Cadillacs with purple polka dots, you need to know the color of every Cadillac on the planet at the very same time, at one given moment in time. And that, a Cadillac with a specific paint color is something that's limited to planet Earth. And that's impossible to prove because we can never be in every place at the same time and know everything there is to know. So what would it take to prove that there is no God? You would have to know what exists in every corner of the entire universe. The known universe and the unknown universe, because the known universe is only as far as we can see, but there's more after that. So is there any human being capable of knowing what exists in the entire universe at the same time? No. You know what? You would have to be God to know that there is no God. It's impossible to prove that God does not exist. So philosophically speaking, an atheist is starting with a handicap because he cannot argue reasonably or logically that God does not exist. And I've heard all kinds of attempts. I've been doing this for over 30 years. You know, I had one professor say to me, well, I don't have to prove that God does not exist because you don't prove those kind of things. He just doesn't exist. My response to him, well, then you believe that he does not exist and you have blind faith. You believe something that you can't support with an argument. So is your faith any different than mine? Yes, because I can support the idea that God exists and I can give you a ton of arguments that are rational, logical arguments. So you're at a disadvantage here. I had another guy tell me, well, God is like a square circle, and I know that square circles don't exist. I said, okay, so you believe God is self-contradictory. Well, explain that to me. How did you come to that conclusion? Well, because a good God would not allow suffering and pain. Okay. Let's talk about that. And we're back to the same argument. There is no logical argument to prove that God does not exist. So that's reason number one. According to John Locke, the mark of a rational person is not entertaining any proposition with greater assurance than the proof it is built upon will warrant. So if you can't provide, arguments, if you can't provide assurance, if you can't provide proof, why should I believe your position? David Hume says a wise man proportions his beliefs to the evidence. Okay, what evidence do you have that God doesn't exist? You don't have any evidence that God doesn't exist, so why should I believe that? How a wise person would never believe that, because there's no evidence for it. Clifford said it's wrong always, everywhere, and for anyone to believe anything upon insufficient evidence. Well, there is no evidence, philosophically speaking, for God's inexistence. So if proof for atheism is unnecessary, then like I said already, it's a belief that's based on blind faith. So don't take that for an answer. Well, I don't have to prove it. Okay, then you believe it by blind faith. You want to see somebody jump? Tell them that. Tell an atheist that he has blind faith. He'll jump. But that's what you're telling me. You're telling me that you don't need to defend it, that you don't have to have an answer. The strongest arguments raised against God's existence don't address whether he exists or not, but rather what kind of a God is he? What kind of a God would allow the A, B, C, or D? What kind of a God would send somebody to hell and for eternity? What kind of a God would... So we're questioning God's character, not his existence. Okay, and all of those issues are valid arguments that need to be addressed. The problem of pain and suffering, the problem of hell, and those are problems that we've addressed and we've answered. And throughout, for centuries, Christianity has been providing answers to those questions. Somebody may not know the answers, and we would have to share it with them, but the answers are there. That's why we have the books that we have out there on the table, because if you want to know the answers to some of these hard questions that people ask, pick up one of those books. Great thinkers have been thinking about these questions and responding to them for centuries. For centuries. And we can benefit from all of that collective wisdom. And that's why these apologetics books are so important, because they help you understand how to respond to these things. But none of that proves that God does not exist. And our lack of understanding or knowledge does not prove or disprove the existence of God. Well, I don't think God exists because nobody's ever seen God. I beg to differ. God took on human form and lived on this planet for 33 and a half years. Well, I don't believe that. Okay, you don't have to believe that. But whether you believe it or not is irrelevant. God did that. You see, the fact is, well, if God exists, how come we don't know, he doesn't show himself? Oh, he does. He does. His Holy Spirit is alive and well and shows himself, and we have conviction, and the Holy Spirit speaks to our heart and our mind. I mean, yeah, you don't believe this, but again, your lack of belief or lack of knowledge doesn't constitute proof that God does not exist or evidence whatsoever. At most, you're proving that you don't believe he exists. Okay, I got that. There's no arguing there. If you don't believe it, you don't believe it. But it's irrelevant as to whether he exists or not. So a quick summary of this first point. It's impossible to prove that God does not exist. If proof for atheism is unnecessary, then it's a belief that's based on blind faith. The strongest arguments that are raised against God's existence do not address whether he exists or not, but rather what kind of a God he is. And our lack of understanding and our lack of knowledge does not prove or disprove God's existence. Okay, so atheism is philosophically unsustainable. Okay, keep that in mind. Now, reason number 2, atheism is scientifically absurd. Okay, so philosophically, not a leg to stand on. Now let's go to scientifically. And this provides for some really heated conversations. Because in the scientific world, They believe that they know everything. And scientifically, science is the only way to acquire knowledge. And if you don't know something scientifically, you don't really know it. And by the way, we're atheists. Okay, what's the scientific evidence for atheism? Does atheism make sense from a scientific perspective? Let's start off with this premise, and this is important. Science doesn't invent the laws of nature. What does it do? It discovers them. We're clear on that. Science doesn't invent the laws that run the universe. At best, they discover them. And there are many laws that they have yet to discover. So what does that say about these laws? That these laws are there to be discovered. Usually when you have laws that govern things, it's because somebody designed it that way. Somebody came up with these laws. Somebody put them into place. Somebody calibrated each of these constants of physics to assure us that what we have is going to work, that things in this world will work smoothly. Now, everything science discovers reveals incredible levels of complexity in structure, in organization, in purpose. The level of complexity we find in the natural world speaks of an intelligent designer. That's just a fact. As a matter of fact, science is so aware of this right now that scientists are moving in the direction of trying to figure out what the intelligent source is. And the prevailing argument is aliens. Some alien race of people far more advanced than us must have designed it. I can show you video clips of Richard Dawkins, the militant famous atheist, saying that if you look at the details of biochemistry and molecular biology, he says, I suppose you're going to find the signature of some kind of designer. There you go. The problem is not admitting that there has to be a designer. The problem is with certain types of designers. They don't like God. And so God cannot be it because they don't like him. But the scientific evidence, all of it points to God. All of it. Not a single shred of scientific evidence is going to point to a universe that came to be without a God. Absolutely. If you heard my talk on Friday, the prevailing theory about origins is a universe from nothing. How desperate do you have to be to claim that nothing did it? Seriously. That's not science. And when you ask the proponents, what evidence do you have? What do they have? No evidence. They tell you they don't have any evidence. So they're believing something. They're grasping for straws because they can't find an answer outside of God. Now let me show you a video. I'm going to show you a couple of video clips that show you the level of intricate and incredibly complex design that exists at a molecular level, at the level of the cell. Okay, just watch this for a minute and then ask yourself as you're watching this, is this something that can happen by chance, unguided, accidental processes without a designer, without a God, without somebody to do it? It's going to be a rhetorical question because the answer is obviously no. Watch this. This is powerful.
Perhaps the most amazing propulsion system on our entire planet is one that exists in bacteria. It's called the flagellum, a miniature propeller driven by a motor with many distinct mechanical parts, each made of proteins. The flagellum's motor resembles a human-designed rotary engine. It has a universal joint, bushings, a stator, and a rotor. It has a drive shaft and even its own clutch and braking system. In some bacteria, the flagellar motor has been clocked at 100,000 revolutions per minute. The motor is bidirectional and can shift from forward to reverse almost instantaneously. Some scientists suggest it operates at near 100% energy efficiency. All of this is done on a microscopic scale that is hard to imagine. The diameter of the flagellum motor is no more than 5/1,000,000 of a centimeter. The bacterial flagellum is one of many molecular machines that scientists have discovered in the last several decades, including energy-producing turbines, information copying machines, and even robotic walking motors. The origin of these exquisite examples of nanotechnology is a mystery that has generated heated controversy among biologists over the past 2 decades.
Do you really think that the bacterial flagellum, an outboard engine, can be the product of random chance and unguided processes? It has over 32 parts, and it has to be assembled to work. So you can't get there gradually. That's what is known in science as irreducible complexity. It's so complex that it cannot build slowly to get until you have an engine. No, the minute you have one of these parts and they don't function for the cell, natural selection will eliminate that cell. And you'll never be able to build the engine. And so think about it. If I showed you an outboard engine of a boat, I mean, Seattle has water, lakes, and it has ocean. You know what an outboard engine is. Would anybody believe that an outboard engine was not designed by anybody and just happened to exist by chance? Of course not. That would be ludicrous. Nobody on the planet would believe that. So why would we believe that it's the case at a cellular level, where it's infinitely more complex and at such a tiny scale? The diameter of the rotor is 5/1,000,000th of a centimeter. That's at a size that we can't even comprehend of tiny. So not only is it incredibly designed, but it's designed at a scale that we can't even touch. We can't come anywhere near anything like that. And by the way, that's a simplistic look at it. You can read an entire chapter in biochemistry on this and see that it has a cooling system, water cooling system. It has an energy source because engines need energy. It works at incredible energy efficiency. It's a miracle. It's one of those things that you're like, wow. So does that point to God or no God? For 100% of the people that are honest, you see something like that, there has to be a God. How about DNA? How can we explain DNA without God? DNA has information. 3 billion chemical letters organized into sentences, paragraphs, and chapters of life, with all the building instructions of life. Where does information come from? Does anybody here know of a source of information that's not an intelligence source? What if I said it the other day, and I don't know if some of you were there, but what if I showed you a book and said, here's a book that nobody wrote? Would you believe it? How could you have a book that nobody wrote? Think about it. If it has sentences and words and paragraphs and chapters, there's somebody, an intelligent mind behind it. And what we have in DNA is more complex than your average book. Far more complex. It's the instructions for building life. Everything we need. Think about it. All the instructions to assemble a fully functional human being is in the DNA. When that egg is fertilized, upon conception, one egg has 23 chromosomes from mama, 23 chromosomes from daddy, and that egg has all the DNA it's ever, by the way, unique identity, unique DNA. That is a unique person at that point. But that's another issue. And so, from that one cell, give it 9 months, and you're going to have a baby. A fully formed, developed baby. And the only information they had to go on was the information in that cell. All of the building instructions for every organ in our body, every bone in our body, every muscle in our body, every centimeter of the miles and miles of nerves that we have in our body, everything about our eyes, our optic nerves, I mean, you name it. Everything, skeletal system, digestive system, everything, all the systems, all the organs, all the parts, fully assembled without any outside intervention. because nobody builds the baby. It auto-assembles itself, which is another incredible miracle, which shows you, like, look, this was designed by somebody whose ability to design is off the charts. Just think about that. The only contribution mama gives is building materials. Sometimes they're running low in sugar, and at 3 in the morning, mama wants ice cream. And go get her some ice cream and pickles. Why? Because there's building materials that are needed for construction. Mama eats that, and construction continues, and the development of a baby. And so that tells you, that points to God. That does not point to a random process with unguided processes. That information is so detailed, it's incredible. What about the manufacturing of proteins? You know that I told you that DNA is all the instructions for life. Instruction books don't build anything. You can get a book at the bookstore on how to build a bicycle. The book is not going to build any bicycles. It's going to tell you how a bicycle is built, but instructions are no good unless you have people and materials, workers, assembly lines, and unless you have the materials and the tools, instructions are meaningless. And yet our instructions are placed in a factory called the cell. And the cell has all the workers and the materials and the metabolisms to read the instructions, follow them. And it's done by building proteins. It's a very complex process. Watch this video. This shows you in a very easy to understand, in lay terms, how one protein is manufactured inside the cell. Just look at the process. And if this doesn't point to God, I don't know what else does. And as an atheist, how could I possibly explain this without God? It's absurd, scientifically absurd for me to say this happens and there is no God. Watch.
Science has revealed the details of an entire system of information processing that bears the hallmarks of intelligent design. With computer animation, we can enter the cell to view this remarkable system at work. After entering the heart of the cell, we see the tightly wound strands of DNA, storehouses for the instructions necessary to build every protein in an organism. In a process known as transcription, a molecular machine first unwinds a section of the DNA helix to expose the genetic instructions needed to assemble a specific protein molecule. Another machine then copies these instructions to form a molecule known as messenger RNA. When transcription is complete, the slender RNA strand carries the genetic information through the nuclear pore complex, the gatekeeper for traffic in and out of the cell nucleus. The messenger RNA strand is directed to a two-part molecular factory called a ribosome. After attaching itself securely, the process of translation begins. Inside the ribosome, a molecular assembly line builds a specifically sequenced chain of amino acids. These amino acids are transported from other parts of the cell and then linked into chains often hundreds of units long. Their sequential arrangement determines the type of protein manufactured. When the chain is finished, it is moved from the ribosome to a barrel-shaped machine that helps fold it into the precise shape critical to its function. After the chain is folded into a protein, it is then released and shepherded by another molecular machine to the exact location where it is needed.
This is absolutely mind-boggling to perceive at this scale of size such a finely tuned apparatus, a device that bears the marks of intelligent design and manufacture. And we have the details of an immensely complex molecular realm of genetic information processing. And it's exactly this new realm of molecular genetics where we see the most compelling evidence of design on the earth.
Think about that. Do you think that happens by chance, unguided processes? A protein goes to the DNA molecule, unravels the section it needs to copy the instructions. By the way, how do you know in 3 billion characters where the instructions for the one protein you want to manufacture is? Well, there's a librarian in the DNA. It's called the epigenome. The epigenome is the librarian. So the epigenome says, oh, you want to manufacture that protein? Easy. Unravel from here to here and copy the instructions. So this messenger RNA molecule makes a copy. I'm not going to say a photocopy because it's not a photocopy. It's a chemical copy. Makes a chemical copy of all the instructions in that section, and then it's wound back up the DNA and it's left there until next time it's needed. Those instructions are then carried into a ribosome, which is a factory, and where those instructions are translated into a chain of amino acids. The right amino acids in the right order. And then it's escorted by chaperones, it's what they're called, so that it doesn't fold prematurely. It's escorted to another molecular machine that folds it. It has to be folded exactly and precisely in the right way, or else it won't work. And once it's done, it's taken to the part of the cell where it's needed to continue manufacturing. By the way, there's quality control. If at any stage of the process it gets damaged, the body will break it down, recycle the materials, and use it to build another protein. Because it didn't come out right. And we start all over again. Go back to DNA, get the instructions, and start again. And what can you do with one protein? Nothing. The simplest cell structure in our body needs between 250 and 400 different proteins. So that process has to happen 250 to 400 times to manufacture a simple cell. By the way, we have hundreds of trillions of cells in our body that were all made this way. So the scientific evidence makes atheism absurd. Absolutely absurd. Let me see if you can guess who said this quote. Another source of conviction in the existence of God, connected with the reason and not with feelings, impresses me as having much more weight. This follows from the extreme difficulty, or rather impossibility, of conceiving this immense and wonderful universe, including man and his capacity to look far backwards and far into futurity, as the result of blind chances and necessity. When thus reflecting, I feel compelled to look to a first cause, having an intelligent mind in some degree analogous to that of man, and I deserve to be called a theist. Can you guess who said that? Charles Darwin. Charles Darwin in The Origin of the Species. He says, when you look at this, it's pointing to intelligent design. It's hard not to see intelligent design. See, in an atheist worldview, there cannot be structure. There cannot be organization. There cannot be purpose, because everything that exists has come about by random chance. Randomness. You can explode 5 billion different factories of metal factories, and you're never going to get a car as a result. Because unguided random events do not produce order, structure. Order and structure only comes intentionally by design. Charles Darwin also said in 1873, the impossibility of conceiving, well, that's part of the quote I just gave you. Okay, that this happened by chance is the chief argument for God's existence. Look at what Pasteur said. Louis Pasteur said, "The more I study nature, the more I stand amazed at the work of the Creator. Science brings men nearer to God." You know what we need to be clear about is God is not the answer to every question. He's the reason we have an answer to begin with. That is what we need to be clear about. Let me give you a quick summary of this point. And I want to show you one more video here that's pretty powerful.
Here we have one tiny grain of sand.
Let me introduce that to you before I show it to you. This video is powerful because this video shows you the probabilities. What are the probabilities? You saw that process of making a protein? What are the probabilities of making a protein by chance? In other words, what are the probabilities of choosing the right amino acid at every point in the chain and folding it in the right direction and getting no lefts and all rights? And what are the odds? When you do the math, what are the odds? And then what are the odds of making life? The numbers are incredible. Incredible. But it's hard for us to imagine the numbers because they're so big. If I say to you 10 to the 164th power, that's a 1 followed by 164 zeros. Like, you can't even imagine how big that number is. That's like, our minds can't process it. So let's look at an analogy. Let's say you have your favorite grain of sand. Okay? That one grain of sand that you just love. You take that grain of sand and you paint it red. And you carve your initials on it. And you want that to be your favorite grain of sand forever and ever. You want to pass that on from generation to generation. But what happens is one day you lose it. How do you find that grain of sand again? What are the odds of finding that grain of sand? Watch this video because that's going to give you an idea of the proportions so you can see how impossible it is to explain things by random chance.
Here we have one tiny grain of sand. It's been estimated that there are 1 million grains of sand in a half a cup. It would take 1 million half cups of sand to fill a swimming pool that's 6 feet deep and 30 feet in diameter. Now, if we took 1 billion of these pools of sand, we could fill Lake Tahoe in Nevada, which is about 22 miles long and 12 miles wide. Think you could find that original grain of sand we started with? We're not done yet. It would take about 1 billion Lake Tahoes to fill the volume of the Earth with sand. The probability of grabbing that original grain of sand out of the Earth filled with sand is 1 in 10 to the 30th power. It would take 100 million Earths to fill one sun with sand, and 1 trillion suns to fill our solar system, 10 trillion solar systems to fill 1 cubic light year, 100 trillion cubic light years to fill the volume of the Milky Way galaxy, and finally 10 billion Milky Way galaxies to fill the observable universe. Whew. That is a lot of sand. The probability of now randomly picking our original grain of sand from the entire observable universe is 1 in 10 to the 96th power. Still a far cry from our protein being formed at 1 in 10 to the 164th power, and even less chance of life evolving from undirected natural processes at the probability of 1 in 10 to the 340 millionth power. Starting to get the idea? Scientists generally consider anything with a probability of less than 1 part in 10 to the 70th power operationally impossible. And by the way, that calculation doesn't take into consideration the information that's stored in the cell, which directs the cell in all aspects of operation. That estimate is solely the chance of chemicals combining to form something living.
The chance of building one protein by chance is infinitely more difficult than finding that one grain of sand that you lost if you had to search the entire known universe full of sand. That would be easier to find your grain of sand than to build one protein. A lot easier. And with one protein, you can't do anything. So you would have to get infinitely lucky an infinite amount of times to be able to come up with life. Science proves that atheism doesn't have a leg to stand on. Quick summary of the scientific answer. Science doesn't invent the laws of nature, science discovers them. Everything that science discovers reveals incredible levels of structure, organization, and purpose. In an atheist worldview, there cannot be structure, organization, or purpose, because everything that exists comes about by random chance. Thus, atheism is scientifically absurd. So we've looked at two reasons: philosophically unsustainable, scientifically absurd. Third reason, atheism is ethically unviable. It's ethically unviable. You cannot live in a world, a world of morality where there is no God. It's impossible. Okay, let me show that to you. In an atheist worldview, man is the ultimate authority. Think about it. If there is no God, who's the ultimate authority on this planet? It's not your dog. It's not any animal you're aware of. It would be us. Humans would be the ultimate authority. There's no other creature on the planet that would have more authority than us if there is no God. So then, guess what? Who's in charge of morality? We are. There is no God. The buck stops here. We are responsible for morality. In an atheist worldview, there's no absolute moral standards that man has to adhere to. Why? Because absolute or objective morality is talking about something that everyone has to obey. Well, if you're making your own rules and I'm making my rules, why would I have to obey yours? Why would you have to obey mine? See, all of our laws would be, and all of our morality would be subjective. It's a matter of opinion. The only way you can get morality that is forced upon everybody, that everybody has to comply with, is if there's a higher authority than us. That's the only way. And so, only if there is a God can you have morality and justice that makes sense. Otherwise, you don't. Everything is random. Everybody picks their own morality, and it has no meaning, none whatsoever. Let me show you a clip. This clip is Professor John Lennox. John Lennox is a believer, a Christian. He's a brilliant man with several PhDs, and he debated Richard Dawkins a few times. This is from one of their debates. And here, Richard Dawkins has proposed, they were debating the book, The God Delusion. And in The God Delusion, Richard Dawkins says that we don't need God for morality. And he brings up the argument of suffering and pain and what kind of a God, and things on this earth are too bad and so wrong that there can't be a God. So this is Lennox's response, and he's quoting from Richard Dawkins' own writings. So giving you that little bit of a background, you can still understand the arguments tremendously. Listen to the points that he makes about morality in a world without God and morality in a world with God. Here we go.
And I find it very interesting, reading one of your other books, River Out of Eden, to find what I understand is your analysis of what the universe is like at bottom. In a universe of blind physical forces and genetic replication, some people are going to get hurt, other people are going to get lucky, and you won't find any rhyme or reason in it, nor any justice. The universe we observe has precisely the properties we should expect if there is at the bottom no design, no purpose, no evil, and no good. Nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. DNA neither knows nor cares. DNA just is, and we dance to its music. Now that seems to me to be saying that good and evil don't exist, so I don't even know where you get the moral criteria to discuss it. If a rock falls off a mountain onto your head and kills you, it makes no sense calling the rock evil. It just exists. If Pol Pot chooses to eliminate 1 million intellectuals, or the 9/11 terrorists choose to fly hundreds of people to their deaths into the Twin Towers, how can you call them evil if they were simply dancing to their DNA? Now that strikes me as a hideous world you're delivering us into that has no morality at all.
Think about that. From an atheist perspective, morality is purely biological. Our genes are the ones that determine our morality, and we are dancing to our DNA. Our DNA is deciding what we do and what we don't do. So, if that is the case, why would we put anybody in prison when the only things that the crimes they've committed, they've done because they're dancing to their DNA? In other words, we're not responsible for our moral behavior because it's our chemistry that's causing it. It's our biology that's causing it. It makes no sense whatsoever to live in a world like that. Now, not all atheists believe that. Some atheists say, well, no, we get our morality from evolution. Do you really want that? Follow that to its logical conclusion. We are animals. We're sophisticated animals. So why is it wrong when a lion kills a gazelle? Why we don't call that murder? We don't put down the lion for killing the gazelle because that's what animals do. What's the difference between a lion putting down a gazelle and someone killing somebody else, their neighbor? Aren't we all animals? Is that the morality we want to have? Sam Harris, who's an advocate of that kind of morality, and he's an atheist, I have him on record as saying in a radio interview that he was given, the radio interviewer asked him, if you had a magic wand, what would you do? If there's one thing you could eliminate from our world, what would it be? And he said, well, if I had a magic wand, I would eliminate, and I had a choice of what to eliminate. Instead of eliminating religion or a rape, I would eliminate religion. I would leave rape, and I would eliminate religion. The guy is scandalized and says, what do you mean? Like, why? What would make you say that? And he says, well, rape is natural. Monkeys rape, orangutans rape, animals rape. It's how we pass our genes to the next generation. That's morality from evolution. Okay, some atheists say, well, I don't buy that. No, we don't want to do that. Survival of the fittest, like everything is for me, and if I can take what you have and it extends my longevity, then I can steal from you because that's okay. That's evolution. I'm stronger than you, so I kill you and take your resources, and I have more of a life. That's evolution. We don't want to do that. And some atheists are smart enough to say, no, we can't do that. Morality comes from social convention. Well, social conventions are humans deciding what's right and what's wrong. And so if we decide what's right and what's wrong, what's make your moral opinion better than mine? What if what I decide is right to do is to steal from you? You know what? I think it's right for me to have a new cell phone, and I love yours, so I'm going to take it. Well, you can't judge that what I did was wrong because I said I think it's right. If you think it's wrong, then don't go stealing anybody's cell phone. But don't judge me for doing it because I think it's good. Do you want to live in a world like that where everybody makes the rules for themselves? Of course not. So, ethically speaking, atheism delivers us into a hideous world, like Lennox said. A world where there's nothing can be judged as wrong. And everybody can do whatever they want. That's the ethics you get when there is no God. And it's not a nice thing. So even Nietzsche admitted as much. When Nietzsche testified, or when he affirmed God's death, and this morning I shared that as well, he was very clear on the chaos it would produce. And in another place he wrote this: when one gives up the Christian faith, one pulls the right to Christian morality out from under one's feet. This morality is by no means self-evident. Christianity is a system, a whole view of things, thought out together. By breaking one main concept out of it, the faith in God, one breaks the whole. It stands or falls with faith in God. He's an atheist, or was an atheist. And that's a very honest view from an atheist, is you can't borrow morality from Christianity. If you don't believe in God, then all of that morality is out the door. And he took it a step further. Listen to how the consequences of that kind of thinking, how it works out into morality. He says equality is a lie concocted by inferior people who arrange themselves in herds to overpower those who are naturally superior to them. The morality of equal rights is herd morality. And because it opposes the cultivation of superior individuals, it leads to the corruption of the human species. That's Nietzsche. He's telling you, okay, we have to come up with our own morality because we don't believe in God, so his morality is out the door. First thing I need to establish is that whole thing about equal rights and everybody being equal, that's not true. That's made up by people to manipulate other people. When you do that, you're ruining the human species. No, there's no equality here. There's superior people and inferior people. And superior people should be allowed to mate and reproduce to advance the species. And inferior people should not. That was Nietzsche. Guess who took that and ran with it? Adolf Hitler. He loved it. He took Nietzsche's philosophy based on Darwinian morals and expressed it in no uncertain terms in his book, Mein Kampf. This is what Hitler wrote in Mein Kampf. He says, if nature does not wish the weaker individual should mate with the stronger, she wishes even less that a superior race like the Germanic race should intermingle with an inferior race like the Jewish race. Why? Because in such cases, her efforts throughout hundreds and thousands of years to establish an evolutionary higher stage of being may be thus rendered futile. And I don't have to tell you where that took him. To the slaughter of millions of people. That's morality without God for you. From the horse's mouth. From atheists themselves. Taking it to its logical conclusion. So, in an atheist worldview, man becomes the ultimate authority. That is not a good thing. In an atheist worldview, there's no absolute morals to which we must adhere. Only in a theistic worldview does morality make sense, and does justice make sense. Thus, atheism is ethically unviable, unlivable. You cannot live in a world where there is no God because the morality would be horrific. Reason number 4, atheism is intellectually unsatisfying. I'm not an atheist because it is intellectually unsatisfying. Meaning the answers I get from atheism are not good answers. I have good questions, and the answers I get from atheism are not good answers. The answers I get from theism, from the existence of God, amazing answers. So which one am I going to go with? I'm going to go with the view that gives me the good answers, that can answer, that can stand up to the scrutiny and the questions that we have. In an atheistic worldview, it fails to answer life's most fundamental questions. Think about it. When you ask life's most fundamental questions, why is there something rather than nothing? We ask the atheist, why is there something rather than nothing? Well, we don't know. Well, how intellectually satisfying is that? Man, I'm glad you answered. Now I feel much better about that. Now that I got my answer, I feel better. We don't know. Okay. Nobody would be satisfied with that answer. You ask the theistic worldview, why is there something rather than nothing? Because an all-loving, powerful God created everything for His purpose and with His design. Now that satisfies my intellect. That's okay. Not only does it make sense scientifically and philosophically and everything else, but you know what? I found an answer, a good answer to my question. What if I ask the question, okay, where does life come from? I asked my fellow atheist scientists, where does life come from? Oh, we don't know. We've looked at 7 different theories of biogenesis and none of them work. So we don't know where life comes from. We know what happens once there's life. Evolution happens. But where did life come from? We don't know. And this is not controversial. I'm not making this up. I can give you a ton of atheists telling you, yeah, we don't know. Nobody knows. Well, no, I'm sorry. I hate to differ with you here. Some of us do know. You don't know, but I do. You ask the theistic perspective, where does life come from? From the creator and sustainer of life, God Himself. And that explains why life is so complex, why DNA is so amazing, why there's so many structures, why we have a bacterial flagellum and all these other things, because there is an incredible, intelligent designer God that did it. We ask atheism, what is the purpose of my existence? Why are we here? What's the atheist going to say? There is no purpose. Nobody planned for you to be here. You weren't even supposed to be here. You're an accident. If everything began again, chances are we would never have people because it all happened by chance. Accidental. So if you're here accidentally, you don't have a purpose. Nobody put you here for a reason. There's nothing you're working towards. I don't know about you, but that doesn't sound very satisfying to me. But when I look to theism for an answer, I'm here because God created us, because God wants me to be here, because I'm made in His image, and because I have a purpose. I represent His kingdom on this earth. I'm here to share the good news with people that are lost. I'm here to help others find the truth and find Christ and enter into eternal life and get the blessing. We all have a purpose for living in God. Without God, what's the point? What's the point? One of my talks this morning, if you were there, was that. What's the point? If 5 million years from now, all of humanity is gone and everyone's dead, what's the point of getting up tomorrow and dealing with the problems you have in life? At the end of the day, nothing matters. We are all going to die. That's the only answer you can get from atheism. And that is very intellectually unsatisfying. That's another reason. And the fifth reason why I'm not an atheist is because theism is intellectually satisfying. Because I find in theism the answers, the best answers that I've ever found to any of the questions. God provides the best explanations for the existence of abstract entities. Why are there numbers? Do you know what numbers are? Numbers are not material. Numbers are immaterial. A number doesn't have any matter, doesn't weigh anything, doesn't occupy any space. And yet, are you going to deny that there are numbers in mathematics? And I mean, think about it. Only in a world where there's a God do those abstract things make sense. No other worldview can give you an answer to that. God provides the best explanation of why the universe exists. God provides the best explanation for the complex order in the universe that we see in DNA and all these structures. God provides the best explanation for objective morality that we see in the world. Everybody knows that there's a right and a wrong, and everybody knows that some things are wrong regardless of your culture, your preferences. Objective morality exists, but we cannot explain it unless there is a God. God provides the best explanation for the historical facts concerning life, death, and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. If there is no God, how do we explain Jesus' miraculous birth, and his miraculous resurrection? We can't explain it. God can be immediately known and experienced. Not only does God provide good answers, but God can be known and experienced. You can know God. You can seek God, you can find God, you can feel and experience God's presence in your life. And you can see his hand guiding you, opening doors, closing doors. You can see his hand providing miracles in your life, healing sometimes if that's within his plan for your life. So God can be experienced. So intellectually speaking, theism blows atheism out of the water completely. So to sum up the 5 reasons of why I don't believe I'm not an atheist, is because, first of all, it's philosophically impossible to prove atheism. Very philosophically unsustainable. Second, it's scientifically absurd, and I've shown you that. It is scientifically absurd. Third, it is ethically unviable. You can't live in a world where there is no God, because the immorality would destroy everything. Fourth, because atheism is intellectually very dissatisfying. And fifth, because theism is absolutely and thoroughly, completely, holistically satisfying in every possible sense of the way. Now, I want to finish with an illustration. Let me show you the difference between the different worldviews when it comes to God. There's many more, but there's 3 major worldviews. One of them is called pantheism. What are pantheists, okay? A pantheist is someone who believes in an impersonal God that literally is the universe. Some people believe that God is the universe. God is nature. Everything is God. It's kind of like a monism. The trees are God, everything is God. You're God, I'm God, everything is God. So God is not this being in heaven. No, everything is God. Nature is God. Let me show you why that doesn't work real quick. Let me show you why it doesn't work. Look at this beautiful painting by Thomas Kincaid. I love his paintings. He's a master of lighting. Okay? Now, imagine that this painting represents the universe, the world, nature, the natural world. Okay? If you're a pantheist, you believe that the painting and the painter are the same thing. Does that make any sense? If you're a pantheist and God is the natural world, then you have to believe that the painter is the same thing as the painting. Do we know any painters that are the same thing as the painting? No. That's incoherent. It doesn't make sense. Now, what is an atheist? An atheist is someone who doesn't believe there is any type of God. So the atheist perspective is just as absurd. For the atheist, that painting had no painter. It's the product of random chances and unguided processes and accidents that produce that painting. There's a painting that's incredibly detailed and beautiful in its colors and its impressions, but there is no painter. That's atheism. The only view that makes sense is theism. The belief that there is a personal God that created the universe. Why? Because then you can say there's a beautiful painting, and you know why it exists? Because there's an amazing painter that did it. So this analogy of the painter and the painting allows us to see the differences in the different worldviews and why only one of them makes sense. If you don't have a worldview where there's a creator that it transcends, that exists separately from the created world, your worldview doesn't make sense. You fall into incoherence. And sometimes lost in all the babble is the simple point that this illustration makes. One view, there's no difference between the creator and the creation, incoherent. Another view, all of creation was not created by anyone. A painting that has no painter, completely incoherent, makes no sense, illogical, unreasonable, patently false. And the other view makes all the sense in the world. There's a world and there's a creator. There's a painting, there's a painter. That's what we have. So that's why I'm not an atheist. I'm not an atheist because atheism is philosophically unsustainable, scientifically absurd, ethically unviable, intellectually unsatisfying, and theism is incredibly satisfying. Let me show you a video that our ministry puts together called Debunked. 3 minutes. Watch this. This is powerful. This is a video responding to the question, there is no God. All of our debunked videos, if you're not familiar with them, are videos that answer questions. They debunk false ideas. So somebody says there is no evidence for God. Let's deal with it. Here we go.
Lots of people say there's no evidence for God. Well, we're going to knock that one out in 3. I'm just going to have to keep it simple, throw in the old 1-2 combo, get in and out real quick, and let you fine folks chat all about it, okay? Punch 1 I'm going to call the info uppercut. When's the last time you walked into a library and asked, hey, where are all the books that have been written by mindless products of natural laws? The librarian would probably laugh at you and tell you that no such books exist. And they don't exist because they can't exist. Why not? Because first of all, it's just common sense. The words that form the message in books always originate from a person with a brain. Or to say it a bit more scientifically, the message of the book, the purpose, comes to be understood by the orderly placement of the words, design, and information. Information. Now, anytime we find info, these basic laws always apply. Number 1, matter doesn't spontaneously produce information. Number 2, only a mental source, intelligence, can generate new creative information. In other words, just like those books that couldn't originate without a mind, neither could life. Why not, you ask? Because we know that DNA contains information. Therefore, the laws of information science apply, which means the information in DNA couldn't have spontaneously generated, and that a mind is behind the information. Period. No exceptions. Look at it this way. The simplest life form we know of is an amoeba, and it contains as much information in its DNA as 1,000 complete sets of Encyclopedia Britannica. So, are we to believe that there's no way a message in a library book could spontaneously generate, but far more complicated messages in DNA that contain 1,000 times more information could have? Not likely. You see, when it comes to life or anything else that contains information, the laws of information science confirm the necessity of a creative mind. And guess what? In the very first book of the Bible, it just happens to mention that. In the beginning, God created. Bam. Uppercut lands on the chin. And now here comes the indefensible head blow. We'll call this the not a big bang bing swing, the KO to the claim that there's no evidence of God, the law of causality, left hook of doom. It goes like this. Everything that had a beginning had a cause. The universe had a beginning, therefore the universe had a cause. Now, either something caused the universe to come into existence, or nothing caused it. I might not be the smartest guy behind the telescope, but honest, practical, everyday thing that's going to lead me to the latter. You have to work pretty hard to conjure up a way that nothing did it. You see, it's pretty improbable, nigh impossible, to account for design, information, and cause if the universe just exploded from nothing. Smack. And while we're on the topic, where did the matter come from that exploded? Are we really to believe that there was nothing and then it exploded, and now the exploded nothing is something, and we just happen to be smart enough to discover and understand the very laws that prove the opposite? And if the general understanding of the law of cause and effect is true, how can matter come from a lesser cause like nothing? I mean, come on. I don't have a bunch of letters after my name, but even a monkey knows better. And yeah, I snuck in a couple of extra jabs in there, so sue me. Now for some parting words from our sponsor, the Bible. It tells us in Romans 1:20 that since the creation of the world, God's invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so they are without excuse. It also says that people actually know the truth, but they reject it, which explains why even though there's overwhelming evidence that there is a God, evidence won't convince the unwilling. Sad but true. So there you have it. With just a couple of meaningful blows, the claim that there is no evidence for God is down for the count, amigos. In other words, it's been debunked. Adios.
Now, those videos, we make them to help you, to give you tools that you can use. So the videos are free. We'll give all of them for you. We have 20 of them that are made, and we're making one every month. We made one recently on abortion a couple of months ago. Next week, we come out with the next one. It's on critical race theory. It's a powerful 3-minute video answering that idea. So you can have it. Some of you have already been with us for a few days. You've seen it. But if you haven't gotten it yet, here's what you do. Send a text to 51555 and type in as the message of the text, "Stay bold, space, creation." And you're going to get a message back in your phone, and that message is going to ask you to fill out a form. Click here to fill out the form. Name and email basically is what we need. We'll put you on the list, and every time we come out with a new one, we'll send it to you. But immediately, you're going to get access to the 20 we already have. This is a tool you can have in your phone. And you can have it on your tablet. And when you're talking to somebody and they say, well, I think the Bible is full of errors and contradictions. Oh, really? Well, let me show you this video. Boom. Show them the video that debunks that. And then say, well, and then have a conversation about it. These videos are powerful. Well, I don't think so many, you can put that many animals in the ark. Really? Let me show you this video. We debunked that idea too about Noah's ark. We have 20, and they're all amazing videos. And we're coming up with new ones all the time. The next 10 of them are going to be amazing. So get them for free. Don't miss this opportunity. Just do that. We'll have you on a list, and we'll let you know every time a new one comes out, and you'll get it on your phone before anybody else gets it. Also, if you haven't downloaded our app, please do so. Reasons for Hope. Find it in your app store. It's a blue asterisk with a black background. That is a powerful app. We have so much information there. We have videos, talks. A bunch of talks of mine are there that you can watch. Talks from my partner, Carl Kirby, that some of you might know. Amazing apologist. Talks from other members of our team. Frank Figueroa, who's one of our apologists. He's out of Hawaii. Dave Glander out of Atlanta. Amazing. And we are all different. And our talks are all different. And they're all amazing. You have PDFs, study guides. You have short video clips, 1-minute apologetics clips that you can watch and show or share to do devotionals. We have a devotional for kids to do with your kids in the app. The app is just loaded, and we continue to put stuff in it, and everything is free. We're giving everything away because we want you to be equipped. Okay, so please download the app. That's how you can help Reasons for Hope, by being informed and being able to promote what you're doing. Please pray for us that God would continue to support us. God touches the hearts of people. They send offerings. They support our ministry. Like all ministries, we depend on donations. But we're not worried about that. That's God's problem, and He's got it covered. Our issue is getting you equipped. Okay, so there's a book we have outside. I highly recommend. That's the only book I'm traveling with. I'm not a book salesman, but it's 28 questions that young people are asking and that we give an answer for. How do we know young people are asking this? Because we ask them camps. Every time we do a camp, we give them an index card the first day of camp, and we say, fill it out and tell us what questions you have, what doubts you have, why don't you believe, what are you struggling with, what's keeping you from selling out? And we spend the whole week answering these questions. So we've got a collection of these index cards. What we did is we tabulated which are the most popular questions. We put 28 of them together in a book, and it's there. Questions like, did Jesus commit suicide? Why did God create homosexuals and then condemn them? What about aliens? I mean, there's a ton of questions there. Why do my parents feel they have to shove Christianity down my throat? What about hell? What about Adam and Eve? What about the days of creation? How old is the earth? Just what about the dinosaurs? I mean, just 28 of the top questions they are asking and answers for those questions. So that book is out there. If you haven't gotten it, please pick up a copy today and give it to one of these young people that need it. Read it as a parent. Be aware of it. Grandchildren, nephews, nieces, sons, daughters. If you know somebody that could benefit from the book, you need to get one for them, because this is a powerful tool. When they see the cover says, did Jesus commit suicide? That's going to draw them in to read that question, that answer. And then they're going to start wondering about the other questions they have, and they're going to find them in there. So we brought that, and we have it out there, along with a bunch of other amazing resources that you can get to equip yourself, to have better answers to give people. So thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you listening to this presentation, and it's been my pleasure to share it with you. Brother Heinz?
Thank you, Juan. So we will take some time for questions. If you have a question, raise your hand. I'm not going to try to run this over. Speak loudly, and Juan, if you...
I'll repeat the question for the video, yes.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I believe you said that Richard Dawkins believes there must be an intelligent designer in order to explain the complexity we see.
Yes.
And that the current favorite candidate for intelligent design is aliens.
That's correct.
So suppose we granted that for the sake of the conversation. You're right. This universe was created by aliens. Seems to me those aliens have to be even more complex than we are. Do they have any explanation for the origin of these aliens?
Great question. The question is, when the atheists posit that aliens are the intelligent design behind the universe, well, do they have any explanation for the origin of those aliens? No, they don't. And it only backs up the question one more. If there were intelligent alien out there, they would also have to be created by some kind of external cause, a god. So it only backs up the question. And by the way, they have zero evidence of alien life to support that thesis. So it is absolutely blind faith on their behalf. Thank you. Good question. There's a question over here. Yes? How fast are the proteins made? Protein synthesis, that whole process you watched, happens dozens of times per minute in your cells. In 1 minute, your cell can manufacture 12, 15, 20, 30 proteins. It's a super fast process, which is also amazing. Good question. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Actually, you can't prove a negative. Every lawyer knows that. Every debate person knows that. Therefore, atheism falls flat on its face right from the get-go.
You can't prove atheism. That's your comment, and absolutely right. From the get-go, you can't prove a negative. That's my first point. It's philosophically unsustainable. There's no logical argument that can prove atheism. Yeah. And you know what? Sometimes they'll push back and they'll say, well, there's no way of proving that unicorns don't exist, but we know they don't exist. And then the response to that is, yeah, but you do understand that you're talking about two different categories of things? We know the origin of your unicorns. Unicorns are invented, and they're made up. People draw them. And people come up with this idea because they like horses and they like and how many people believe in unicorns? Exactly. And so, but God is different. How many people believe in God? Almost the entire population of the planet. So it's different categories. You can't compare the two things. And by the way, there may be unicorns somewhere because we have no way of knowing. Yes, back there. Yes, sir.
So with all the information that's coming out to debunk Darwinism and stuff like that, what does the scientific community do about that? Do they come up with a different form of evolution to teach our kids in school, or do they just keep trying to reinforce something that over time has been shown to be untrue?
Great question. The question is, what does the scientific community do with the growing evidence that the current theory doesn't work? Do they continue to teach it, or are they looking for alternatives? That's a great question. Thank you for asking. They are looking for alternatives, absolutely. What is happening is, there was a meeting a couple of years back of the Royal Society of Biologists and Scientists in London. The point of that meeting was several papers were presented with alternatives to evolution. They are seeking other alternatives. but they haven't found one yet that they can build upon. But that's happening at the highest levels of science. That even when they do find a theory, it'll take years to trickle down to the classroom in your local elementary or middle school or high school. So the philosophy is we're going to keep teaching this until we have a better answer. That's the philosophy of the people high up there. But they are already discussing alternatives because the modern synthesis, which is what Darwinism is called now, doesn't work. And people know that. It creates more problems than the questions it answers. And it doesn't explain the design, which every day we see more of. So we need an alternative theory. That's what they're looking for. So great question. Okay, the question is, how do sociologists and historians and politicians deal with Bible prophecy and the picture Bible prophecy has for the end times and what's going to happen, when obviously the secular picture looks nothing like what God's picture looks like? How do they respond to that? That's the question. Good question. Thank you. Politicians answer whatever the people want to hear. So a politician's answer is not that valid. If the people want to hear that Bible prophecy is true, that's what the politician will say. If the polls say that people prefer not to deal with Bible prophecy, then the politician won't touch it. So they're kind of a different category of people. But sociologists and historians, there is no answer. When you present prophecy, especially before you speak about the picture for the end that the Bible has, you need to lay the case that prophecy has already been made and fulfilled. The Bible already has prophecies that came true, hundreds of them. So that establishes the trustworthiness of the prophecies. Once you've established the trustworthiness of the prophecies, then you can say, and here's the ones that haven't come true yet, but they will just like the others. Here's what it looks like. There's no response to that. You can either recognize that that is a fact, or you can make believe it's not there, or you can say, well, I don't believe that. Well, what part of it don't you believe? You don't believe that these predictions were made and came true? Because I can prove that to you. You don't believe that the ones that are yet to be, yet to happen are going to happen? Okay, how do you come to that conclusion? Okay, why don't you believe it? Give me answers. Okay, so you can press it, but at the end of the day, faith is something people have to choose. They choose to believe or they choose not to believe. My experience is that when somebody is open to faith and to believe, they don't require tons of evidence to believe. With a little bit of evidence, removing just some minor obstacles, they're ready to go. But when somebody doesn't want to believe, it doesn't matter. You can stand on your head and speak 20 languages. You can give them every evidence under the sun, and they're not going to believe it. Because at the end of the day, we choose to believe or we choose not to believe. That's the bottom line. That's why without faith, we can't get anywhere. And we have that option, but you can't force people to believe. But good point. Thank you. Good question.
You said you were talking about pantheism, and I'm thinking, wasn't pantheism the official religion of the Third Reich? And isn't it also the religion that today's environmental movement is based on?
Pantheism is widespread. All of the Eastern religions are pantheist, primarily Hinduism and everything that stems from Hinduism. New Age is pantheist. Pantheism is a very common, even among spiritualists, whatever that is. The idea that, you know what, nature is so awesome, it must be God. And it's very convenient theology, because the tree is not going to demand morality from me. So it's awesome. I'm worshiping God, but God is demanding nothing of me, because he's not this guy up there telling me what to do. He's this wonderful tree and that beautiful deer that's in my backyard today. So it's very convenient, but it is prevalent everywhere. I'm not sure that it was the theology or the position of the Third Reich. I know that Hitler at some point had a Christian background, but he abandoned that, obviously and very clearly. And he pursued the purely naturalistic perspective, that we are evolving and the superior race has to be allowed to reproduce with itself so that we can reach the next level. And so we exterminate the Jews and the gypsies and everybody else they exterminated. So I don't know how much pantheism played a role in that. I've never really looked into that. But that would be interesting to look into. Thank you. There's a question back there too. Yes, sir.
Could you explain why with the evidence that is in creation, more toward the human body and how we're created, how we're formed, how we why is it that the Christian scientists, don't have such a loud voice in the world, in society, and why is it a smaller amount of people who are not believing have the louder voice?
Yeah.
Why is this big, huge imbalance?
That's a phenomenal question. The question is, for the camera, why, if we have so much evidence of creation, of intelligent design, of a God that created the universe, why is the Christian creationist message so non-existent in comparison to the overwhelming message of the naturalistic evolutionary story? That's a great question. It's a complex question because there's many reasons for it. First of all, the Christian creationist voice is there. It is well represented. Atheism, and if you associate naturalism with atheism, which it is, they don't believe in anything supernatural. So most of secular science is atheistic by nature. If you compare that atheism with the theism of Christianity, and you take it to what science, how successful these scientists are, Christian scientists are much more successful than non-Christian sciences. And that's measured, I gave that in one of the talks this week, that's measured by, there's a study that was made of 100 years of the Nobel Prizes. And in that study, a gentleman, Abu Baruch Shalef, and you can find the book on Amazon and you can download it to your reader. It's called 100 Years of the Nobel Prize. And in that book, in that study that he did, he tabulated everything we know about the winners from 1901 to 2000. 100 years of Nobel Prize winners. The Nobel Prize offers 3 prizes in the realm of science. There's a Nobel Prize in chemistry, a Nobel Prize in physics, and a Nobel Prize in medicine. Okay, and in the 100-year history that he monitored, okay, when he wrote the book, in chemistry, 72.5% of the winners were Christians, were believers, theists. That's 3 out of 4. By the way, the other 27.5% were not atheists. There were Muslims, there were Buddhists, there were Hindus. And so atheism accounts for about 8% of the winners across the board in all the categories. So Christian chemists are doing exceedingly superior work to atheist chemists. In physics, it was 60, I think it was 64, if I'm not mistaken, in the 60s, just under 66%. Like almost 2 out of 3 physicists winners of the Nobel Prize were believers in God. So the physicist believers are doing a lot better, 3 times better than the non-believers. And in medicine, 62%. Overwhelming majority again. So Christian scientists are doing better science than non-Christian scientists. That's a fact. But the problem is that the microphone, who's holding the microphone? Whoever holds the microphone has the loudest voice. The people that are holding the microphone are secular naturalist scientists. They're the department heads in the secular universities, in our Ivy League universities. And so when the press wants to talk to somebody, they don't go to the Christian scientists. They go to the Ivy League, Harvard biologist or paleontologist, the guy at Princeton, the guy at Yale, the guy at University of California, the guy at UPenn. And so in these major secular institutions, naturalism is the philosophy. And if you're a Christian scientist, you're not hired because you don't abide by the philosophy of naturalism. So Christian scientists end up working independently, working for smaller universities and community colleges, working for Christian universities, or being in the closet, being quiet about their Christianity and doing the work that they're doing. Okay, but the microphone is being held by the skeptic, the non-believing, the atheist, the naturalist. So they're the loudest. That's what happens. And there's the bias, the media bias. When they want an answer, they want to go to those guys because that's the answer they want to hear. They won't go to a Christian creationist to get an answer. They don't. When you go to social media, you know, the atheist websites and the atheist social media sites are promoted heavily by the platforms, and Christian sites and ideas are promoted a lot less. The algorithms are totally different. Our message doesn't, because society doesn't want that message out there. Because everybody's bought into this big idea of evolution as a source of origins, and that God is fable and fantasy and fiction. So it's a complex set of reasons. That's in part why we observe what we observe today.
Besides, our students are trained in our public schools, you know, that evolution is science and it's true.
Yep.
And it's hard to, you know, get a word in on creation in public schools at all.
Yep. Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned that the atheist doesn't believe in miracles. All right. But all these atheists, have any of them had any kind of surgery? I mean, if you go to a surgeon, you expect a certain result. If they're going to remove cancer, if they're going to do anything. That, to me, is a miracle. I mean...
Well, they would not acknowledge that that's a miracle. You know, an atheist would never acknowledge that a typical surgery is a miracle. Why? Because it's a person doing it, and it's a material process, and they're removing something and sewing it. There's no miracle there. In their mind, there's no miracle there. It's hard to prove that there's a miracle there. When there's a miracle is because, you know, there was a tumor and now there isn't one, so we don't have to do surgery. That is like, wow, I don't know what to do with that. And there are many cases like that. And what the medical and the scientific community of non-believers do with that is they walk away with it. They don't talk about it. They walk away from it. They don't touch it with a 10-foot pole. But they know it's happening because they see it. They see it. But
You're talking to a miracle. I mean, I had a sepsis infection and I was this far away from
Yep.
going the other direction. For some reason, I'm not wanted up there right now, so whatever.
Yeah.
But I mean, you know, if you could say to me, I mean, why did I survive?
Yep. To the atheist, that would not be a satisfactory reason. They would reject that. You survive because of modern science and because evolution allowed us to advance so far in science that we're able to do surgeries. That's their answer.
They don't like the other answer.
Yep.
Yeah.
True.
Yes, ma'am.
What's the attraction of atheism?
And I know, you know, I think you can look at it as, people will want, because they don't want any rules, they don't want to have to follow morality. But the atheists I
Well, there's different, the question is, what is the attraction of atheism? There's different types of atheism. We need to classify what is driving the atheist to not believe. My experience is that the vast majority of atheists are emotional atheists. They're not atheists for intellectual reasons, they're atheists for emotional reasons. They've lost somebody, they've suffered a horrible situation in their lives, they were abused, something horrible has happened, and they're angry at God, and they cannot reconcile the idea that if God existed, that would have happened to me. So they're convinced that because something bad happened to them or one of their loved ones, there can't be a God. It's an emotional attraction to that. Attraction may not even be the right word, but it's an emotional bond to the idea that there is no God. Now, there are other kinds of atheists. There's the intellectual atheist, and he believes that he cannot believe in God because he believes God is a contradiction. That God just doesn't exist because he can't exist. Because evil and suffering is in the world, but it hasn't affected him personally. It's theoretical, it's intellectual. So there's these intellectual reasons why I don't believe God exists. That's what that group. Now what attracts them is a lot of them are attracted to the idea because of morality. Because it's kind of like, okay, I can dismiss God for these reasons, and therefore I don't have to deal with all the do's and don'ts. I can do whatever I want. Many atheists are on record saying, I don't believe God exists because I don't want there to be a God. They say it. A lot of them are very emphatic and open about it. I don't want the world to be like that. I don't want there to be a God. And what they're telling you is, I want to do whatever I want, and I don't want anybody to hold me accountable for it. So that is part of the reason. And there are other motivations and other attractions, but with those two, you kind of covered the basis primarily, of at least what I've encountered in my experience.
I would add to that, you will very infrequently get an opportunity to present these 5 reasons that you just covered.
I would not be given a chance usually.
Right. If they know what you're going to say, they don't want to listen to it.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
I'll give you an example. That's a great comment. I'll give you an example. Miami-Dade College is one of the largest colleges in the country, and they're in Miami-Dade College. They have numerous campuses. You'd think you're walking into Harvard. I mean, they're amazing campuses, and they have hundreds of thousands of students across the world, online and in person. So, and they have one of the campuses in Kendall, an area, a suburb of Miami. They have a professor who's an atheist, and he does a lecture every year, a campus-wide lecture in the auditorium, and it's announced, and certain students have to go, like all the honors students have to go, and students in such a program have to go, and everybody else is invited to come. And they're all venomous lectures. One year he did a lecture called The Evil Jesus, and the whole lecture was denigrating Jesus. Another year he did a lecture of why he was an atheist. That year that he did why he was an atheist, I wrote a paper called Why I'm Not an Atheist, that I build this talk based on that paper. And I approached the Bible club, one of the Bible clubs, and I said, look, put on an event. Let's do a counter event where we talk about 5 reasons why I'm not an atheist. Oh, what a great idea, because the campus was abuzz with his reasons for being an atheist. And so they went and I'm sorry, the student government, we don't have any rooms available at any time for the rest of the school year, so I'm sorry. That was the response, which, by the way, was a lie. Flat out, blatant lie, because we went on that campus multiple times to do evangelism, and we saw many days where that auditorium was empty. Nothing was happening in there, but they would not give a chance to the other side. That's what we're up against. Now, the student organization could have fought it, but the sponsor told me, look, if I fight the whole administration, they're going to make my life impossible with my group, and we're making good inroads. People are getting saved, so I don't want to ruin this good thing. We could fight that, but let's leave it for another day. And I'm like, sure. I mean, I'm just making myself available, and that's the kind of stuff that happens.
Okay, I think we'll bring this to an end for now, and Juan will be available to answer other questions back there, and take advantage of all the resources up there, see if there's anything you would like to have to take home with you. So Juan, I want to thank you for that, and
Amen.
also just to mention again, there is a green box out there, free will donations, and if you want to contribute to Reasons for Hope Ministry, just add something to that box there. So Juan, would you close us in a word of prayer?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Father God, I thank you for tonight, Lord. I thank you for allowing us to get here, to spend this time together. Lord, you know who is here and who is not, and you know why we're here today. Father, you orchestrated this meeting long before we even ever thought about it. So, Father, I thank you for that. I thank you that these words will have an impact in the lives of the people that have heard it here today and the people that will watch this online. Lord, I pray that our faith would have been strengthened tonight. I pray that we're walking out of here with a stronger faith that we're serving and we're doing the right thing, that we're living for a just and righteous cause, the cause of Christ, that we know, that we be sure that we are serving a living, loving, amazing Creator God that does exist. And I pray, Lord, that you would give us wisdom to talk to our friends, wisdom to talk to our family members that may not believe in God, wisdom to approach the people that we come across that do not believe in God, and that maybe some of these arguments would be persuasive to them as we try to sow the seed of the gospel in the lives of people that are lost. Thank you for this church, for Calvary. Thank you for allowing us to be here. Bless the church, the staff, the pastor. Thank you for the volunteers that are working here tonight. And I pray, Lord, that you would just continue to add to your church those that are going to be saved in these days. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen.